Change your view of him at all?
I mean, my view of him is actually the same, which is this is a guy that wants to be president more than any other human being, I think, currently alive. And I think he's willing to do it.
Of course, he says not, but
well, yeah,
most people don't believe that.
I mean, not every governor in the country has a podcast and inviting, MAGA faithful. Again, I'm not a mind reader. I can only kind of see where he's going, and it looks as if he's trying to be on the popular edge or the popular side of the issues right now. I don't know the man personally. I do think he's done destructive things to this beautiful state, a state that I love, and he's going to have to explain that, and the voters overwhelmingly across the country think negatively of it. But I will say this, credit to him. The positive thing I'll say, credit to him for being willing to have a conversation, be willing to have dialogue. I wish more people on the left would be willing to do so.
What do you think of him?
That's what it comes down to.
As a presidential candidate, do you think he's the strongest Democrat?
I mean, I don't even know what the field would look like. I would say this, though, that he at least has some self-awareness. He didn't say this to me, but I think he at least has some self-awareness that the rest of the country thinks so negatively about the California experiment. If you were to go into Pennsylvania and say that I'm a governor of California, you're dealing from like a 20-point disadvantage. People think of the state very negatively. I think that perception is reality. He does not. And so if he were to run for the presidency in 2028, he's going to have to try to rebrand himself. And I think this podcast is his attempt to do that.
Charlie Kirk. I don't even think all those people that may not think college is the right thing for you. I do not believe that Charlie Kirk went to college. I just thought about that. But let's look at a couple other clips from this interview. This one was regarding one of the laws that Gavin Newsom put in play, which they kind of go back and forth as far as with the involvement of teachers. What do you mean? The involvement of teachers as far as what's their responsibility in allowing and letting parents know information about their kids. But let's take a look at that, and you guys let me know your thoughts. Hold on, let me get out of these. Do we already have it up? Okay. No, that's the wrong one. All right, 1 sec.
My God.
Host and political organizer Charlie Kirk drawing a big crowd at Cal State Northridge. This is and only
conversation and to be invited there. Look, it was really interesting. It was obvious that the governor wants to move to the middle on a lot of the political issues that the Democrat Party has been on the unpopular side of. The one that's making the most headlines, obviously, is biological men in women's sports. And he said he totally agrees with me, and that's a direct quote.
Were you surprised by that?
I was a little taken aback. I anticipated a little bit more of a politician answer. You could kind of see that laced in, but then he just bluntly said, look, I agree with you. It's about fairness. He's already receiving a lot of backlash by local leaders here in California for that position. And we'll see if he actually follows up that rhetoric with action, like an executive order or trying to champion the state bill that will prohibit biological men in women's sports. But
that's what it's going to come down to. Are you going to actually put your money where your mouth is? Are you going to put the legislation aligned with what you just said in your conversation with Charlie Kirk? I don't think Gavin Newsom is really built for that. I don't think he wants to actually put those policies in play, because he would have to, it would be admitting that he was wrong on so many things previously. Now, maybe he will. Maybe he will. But to me, matter of fact, I shouldn't say that he wouldn't do it. I think Gavin Newsom will do any and everything that makes sense based on his calculations at that time, as far as what can I do to appeal to become president and give myself the best opportunity to become president. I don't think that he has. See, I think that his ego is a little bit different than others. I don't think that Gavin Newsom has a problem admitting if he was wrong on something, if he sees it as, oh, if I admit that I'm wrong on this, it'll give me a better opportunity to become president. All right, bet I'll go admit it. That's what I think he's drawn to. So that may be seen as a positive in some ways, but it also may be seen as something that's very dangerous. Somebody that will do and say anything and be swayed any direction based on what they need to do to appeal to people for their votes.
But the reaction so far has been quite promising.
Well, let's talk about that backlash. Scott Wiener, who's a state senator from California,
He's
called
a big fan of mine.
a vile bigot. He said what Newsom said was profoundly disturbing. He says it creates a fake moral panic. California Legislative LGBTQ Caucus says it was profoundly sickened and frustrated by what the governor said. How do you respond to that?
I mean, I've gone back and forth with Mr. Weiner on Twitter or X quite often. Look, I don't have to respond or justify his attacks towards me. I will say, though, that 80% of Americans want to see youth sports in general, but all sports where biological men are not competing with competing in women's spaces or in women's sports. But look, he can name call all he wants, but I think his problem is actually with his governor, and I'm kind of see how they reconcile this, right? I mean, look, he can go back and forth with me. I'm not the governor of this state. Yeah. His own governor has actually decided to moderate on the position, at least in rhetoric. We'll see if it comes in action, and I think it's very interesting that at this moment where the Democrats are kind of in the wilderness, they're looking for their own political leader, seems as if Governor Newsom wants to try to position him as the moderate. I think he's been a total failure as governor. We could talk about that if you'd like. But at the very least, from a rhetorical standpoint, he's starting to say things that would make the Democrat Party more palatable to the rest of the country.
What's the backstory on this podcast? How did you get involved in this?
I got a phone call from Governor Newsom 2 weeks ago.
Himself. He called you himself.
That's right, yeah. Connected through Kimberly Guilfoyle. Obviously, you know, they have a shared past, yeah.
That's who connected you to?
Well, I mean,
Kimberly Guilfoyle?
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
So,
okay, his ex-wife, of course.
Yeah, so shared past. And I know KG, as we call her, who's now going to be the ambassador to Greece through Trump World. And I talked to...
That's interesting. His ex is going to be the ambassador of Greece through her relationship with Trump. Gavin Newsom's ex. Very interesting.
The governor, he said, hey, I'm doing this podcast. I want to have you on. Would you like to come on? I said, yeah, I'll talk to anybody anytime. It's kind of my whole shtick. I'll do this on a college campus. So we went out to his podcast studio and we said, hey, let's talk about anything, you know, keep it civil, which I think we did a good job of that. And then I tried to press and challenge him on some of the core failures that I would say that he is responsible for here in California, such as homelessness and crime and poverty rate and wealth inequality. And he obviously has some, you know, tailored responses to that. But yeah, that's the backstory.
Did he change your view of him at all?
I mean, my view...
This is the main question right here.
Tailored responses to that. But yeah, that's the backstory.
Did he...
Y'all know what it is. It's Dak from the OG Network. Man, I just want to thank y'all. That's right, to thank y'all for all of your tremendous support over the years, whether you've been rocking with us from the beginning or maybe this is the first show that you're checking out on the network. We want to thank you nonetheless. And we have an ask, all right? We have a goal of reaching 20,000 subscribers by the end of March. That's right, 20K by the end of March. It's not a real goal unless you put a date on it. And with that, we need your help. So we ask that if you are enjoying the content that you like, subscribe if you haven't already. And if you're feeling real generous, maybe share with some friends and family. All right, I'll let y'all go. And once again, thank you for your continued support. And we look forward to growing.
And he obviously has some, you know, tailored responses to that. But yeah, that's the backstory.
Did he change your view of him at all?
I mean, my view...
This is the main question right here.
Tailored responses to that. But yeah, that's the backstory.
Did he change your view of him at all?
I mean, my view of him is actually the same, which is this is a guy that wants to be president more than any other human being, I think, currently alive. And I think he's willing to do
what... Of course he says not, but
well, yeah, I mean,
people don't believe that.
I mean, not every governor in the country has a podcast and inviting, you know, MAGA faithful. Again, I'm not a mind reader. I can only kind of see where he's going. And it looks as if he's trying to be on the popular edge or the popular side of the issues right now. I don't know the man personally. I do think he's done destructive things to this beautiful state, a state that I love. And he's going to have to explain that, and the voters overwhelmingly across the country think negatively of it. But I will say this, credit to him. The positive thing I will say, credit to him for being willing to have a conversation, be willing to have dialogue. I wish more people on the left would be willing to do so.
What do you think of him
That's what it comes down to.
as a presidential candidate? Do you think he's the strongest Democrat?
I mean, I don't even know what the field would look like. I would say this, though, that he at least has some self-awareness. He didn't say this to me, but I think he at least has some self-awareness that the rest of the country thinks so negatively about the California experiment. If you were to go into Pennsylvania and say that I'm a governor of California, you're dealing from like a 20-point disadvantage. People think of the state very negatively. I think that perception is reality. He does not. And so if he were to run for the presidency in 2028, he's going to have to try to rebrand himself. And I think this podcast is his attempt to do that.
Charlie Kirk. I don't even think all those people that may not think college is the right thing for you. I do not believe that Charlie Kirk went to college. I just thought about that. But let's look at a couple other clips from this interview. This one was regarding one of the laws that Gavin Newsom put in play, which they kind of go back and forth as far as with the involvement of teachers. What do you mean? The involvement of teachers as far as how what's their responsibility in allowing and letting parents know information about their kids. But let's take a look at that, and you guys let me know your thoughts. Hold on, let me get out of these. Do we already have it up? Okay, okay. No, that's the wrong one. All right, 1 second. Let me just make sure I get the right clip for y'all. All right, here we go.
Parents if their kids are trans.
Not true.
Okay,
Factually untrue.
Hold on, back it up.
You signed a law where school districts can't even tell parents if their kids are trans.
Not true.
Okay,
Factually
then,
untrue.
okay, then
No, they can. They just can't get fired for not doing that. And it wasn't just trans.
Fired for not.
The law was explicit, said you can't be fired for not snitching on a kid, not just for being trans, for being gay.
Do y'all think that it's a teacher's responsibility to tell parents if their child is coming out as trans or gay in school? When I think back, and this is one of those things where when he explains it this way, I have more hesitation than I would based on how I previously understood his policy on this. But when I think back to when I was in school, the things that my parents may have been called for, or the things that other classmates of mine may have been called for, I would think that this would fall into that category. And I think that it should be an obligation or responsibility for the parent or for the teacher to let the parent know about that. I do think that the parent should be notified about that. But I guess then it comes down to, how do you see transgenderism? How do you see being gay, being a lesbian? Transgender, to me, falls in a different category than gay. And I think that a lot of gay and lesbian people feel that way as far as trans. I know they're all lumped into this LGBTQIA. I don't even know what the IA means, or plus. I hear different letters being added all the time. But I think that they are different. But because they lump everything into the same category, then I'll do that as far as the movement. Do you see transgenderism as a mental health disorder? Do you see transgenderism as, let's just keep it on the mental health. If you see it as a mental health disorder, is that something that parents should be notified by teachers? Even if you don't see it as a mental health disorder, I see it as a very significant thing in that child's life. So to me, I think the parents should be given that information by a teacher. Now, when you protect the teacher and say to a teacher, hey, you're not going to get fired if you don't say that, the problem is, in my opinion, so many of these teachers are so liberal leaning, whether it's at college, universities, high schools, middle schools, elementary schools. They're so liberal leaning, in my opinion, that gives them space. It gives them a way out of not telling the parents. And I do think that is a problem as I'm processing it, as I'm talking to y'all right now. Y'all tell me in the comments, what do y'all think? What do y'all think? Let me Mama Lay in the building. Happy Friday, OG fam. Ant wrote, anyone I trust to watch my children, I think it's their responsibility to report back to me anything they notice my child is exhibiting, just as if it were me witnessing it myself. That's why I asked, bro. I wanted to ask because as I don't have kids, so therefore my views on it may be irrelevant to a lot of y'all. But Ant just made it very clear that he thinks it's a responsibility that should be laid on the teachers. Uncompetitive wrote, I equals intersex equals disorders of sexual development and sexual orientation. Okay. They're now my proxy. I get what you're saying as far as when anybody's taking care of your kids. I get what you're saying. A equals asexual or romantic, which does not, which is based on, so you're saying like A equals asexual or romantic sexual orientation, but rather the lack of it is not sexual orientation. I get what you're saying, but rather the lack of it. I get what you're saying. Uncompetitive is breaking it down for us. P equals pansexual as distinct from bisexual, where pansexual is deemed more inclusive as transgenders, as some bisexuals will have sex with males and females, but not males pretending to be. This is all confusing for me. This is all confusing to me. But what's not confusing to me is that if I had a child, I would want to know if my kid is seeing themselves as different than what they are biologically born, or if they are gay or lesbian. I would want to know that. Let's keep going.
And my point is, how in the hell
But
are you
shouldn't the
telling
parents know?
They have every.
Wait, is
by the way,
telling parents snitching?
no.
I got you.
The
Come on,
teachers
competitor.
themselves have the right. The law is they can do that. They can do that. We're not saying you can't do that. We're saying you shouldn't be fired if you choose not to say Johnny was talking about liking some other boy or something.
That's a charitable reading. The other
It's not
way
charitable. It's actually.
Let me
the
No, I
freedom
need to
not
know that.
Let me tell you
snitch.
the other way to say this.
Snitch.
That a teacher, of course, should be fired if you don't notify a parent of what's happening to their kid.
But
Of
I mean,
course, they should be terminated for that.
If on health and safety, shouldn't they be teaching? I want these kids to teach. I want these teachers to teach. And by the way, if they feel like the health or safety of their kid, they have a responsibility to communicate. They still can. By the way, we're not telling these teachers they can't. We're saying they won't be fired if they don't look around and say in the recess there were two boys. Why didn't you see that? You're fired.
They are. A lot of people. He could sit here and say they're not telling them that, but you're incentivizing it. You're providing a space that they don't have to, and you already know that the way that the teachers lean, that they're not going to be as likely to tell the parents. So he can play these little mind games or interpretation games, but we know what's happening and how it's being presented to teachers and the things that they're doing based on them having that out to not tell the parents.
You should have said something because they're talking
about two different things. But there, of course, should be a penalty measure, whether it be termination or whatever, if a teacher withholds information from a parent. Because what you're saying is that there's no way to hold them accountable. So you're saying
accountable to what, though?
The
Accountable
parents,
to two kids talking about the fact that
this is
they're talking about subject matter.
Two kids talking about subject matter. If those two kids were talking about subject matter that was deemed inappropriate in another way, you would tell the parents. But now you're trying to, he's trying to like just throw it over. Oh, they're just talking about subject matter. Like they shouldn't be held, teachers shouldn't be held accountable to tell the parents about this. Parents, what do y'all think? And this is why, let me kind of pivot a little bit. When I have conversations with people that vote Democrat and I say, you voted for.
It's Dak. Just want to thank you for checking out our video and visiting the OG Network. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure that you give us a like. And if you're looking to join a community of inspired individuals striving for purposeful abundance, subscribe. And if you're feeling real generous, share the video with some friends and family. All right, I'll see y'all soon. Ew.